Hi, my name's Dave Clark and I'm a journalist. I'm working on a series of podcasts with Susie Garrard, the founder of Next Steps for Living, Dying and Grieving. With the death rate in the UK currently standing at 100%, this is a subject that will touch us all. We'll be looking at the importance of living well and planning. And in this episode, I'm talking with Kerry McNish from the Rowcroft Hospice about talking, the importance of conversations which can be tricky for everyone concerned. Those who are dying, their friends, relatives and professional carers, where it's common for everyone to feel a fear that they will say or do something wrong. Let's hear from Kerry about her work.
So my name is Kerry McNish and I'm the Head of Education at Rowcroft Hospice in Torquay. I started quite early in palliative care, which is maybe more usual now, but it certainly wasn't at the time. I just realised about a year after qualifying that this is what I wanted to do, and I did a course, funnily enough, here at Rowcroft. So I travelled from Exeter to here, and in that time I had a placement with Exeter and they spotted potential, I think. And they were right, it's what I wanted to do. Here I am 32 years on. So Rowcroft are the specialist palliative care provider for Torbay and South Devon. So each year we look after about 2,000 patients.
In the UK, are we getting better at having conversations about death?
Yes, I think in my 32 years I've definitely seen an improvement. We're still a long way to go. In 2008, the Department of Health published its first end-of-life care strategy. Never had one before. And there was a whole chapter given up to this subject about how ready are we as a society. And one of the things that came out of that was the launch of a coalition, it was called, but essentially an ambition to change conversations in the UK. And it was launched by an organisation called Dying Matters, which is a charity that now sits with Hospice UK. So we've got better at it. I think the Victorian attitudes of doctor knows best have largely receded, and the empowerment campaign where people say it's my right, my body, my life, more people are wanting to take control over that where they can. And there are things they can control in terms of end-of-life care. They can make decisions in advance about refusing treatments if they don't want it, so long as they follow the right process and do an advanced decision with their physician. I think there's been a rise in applications for lasting power of attorneys, for example. There are growing compassionate communities as well, compassionate cities like Bristol and Plymouth. And all of these are opportunities for us to talk about life, death and all the bits in between.
Do you find that there's quite a lot of fear from people who worry that they're going to say the wrong thing?
Yes. Families worry about that, and healthcare professionals and social care professionals worry about that.
So in other words, it's not just a family thing, it's everybody's worried about saying the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And what should we be doing to overcome that fear?
And I suppose me, Kerry, would be saying, actually, feel the fear and do it anyway. At least explore the opportunity of having that conversation. Don't shut it down before you've even got there. So for me, it starts with an attitude, a willingness to engage in somebody and having conversations. And stopping using the word difficult. I think we all label them difficult and that makes it even harder. Actually, many people welcome those conversations. And research will show that actually they're expecting the doctor, the nurse, to actually start those conversations. Many people will say, I'm not trained in it, don't know how to, and I suppose there is a training aspect to it of, I don't have the skills, but there's a fantastic amount of resources out there, both from places like Dying Matters, which is a national organisation, and Compassion in Dying. There's so many resources. Our own website has got a list of resources and all our training materials that anybody can access. And they can come on our training and practice those sorts of skills. But it starts with that openness, that willingness to do it. And then sure, there are some skills. But people are frightened maybe of the impact of their illness on their loved ones. People fear being, and it's a horrible word, but they use it a lot, being a burden on their loved ones, knowing what's to come. People worry about how they're going to die. So they might have seen somebody die before, they might have heard stories, they might just see it from the press or from the videos or whatever they've seen film, and imagine it, and always imagine the worst. And maybe what kind of, legacy they're leaving too. Their life, who have they been, what have they done, what impact have they had in the world. Maybe not ready to go yet. I've still got work to do. What's going to happen to my house, my family, those sorts of fears. Who's going to put the bins out?
Yeah.
Who's going to do the cooking, especially if you've got family and children or grandchildren.
So just thinking about what you've been saying, there's lots of different people in different positions. So you have people who are, at some point, they know that they are nearing the end of their life, and they have their own fears about where they're going, spirituality, their legacy, what they're going to leave behind, and who's going to put the bins out and do the cooking.
Yeah.
You've got their relatives who are not trained carers, but they may be worried about saying the wrong thing and putting their foot in it, or maybe even being too emotional and breaking down and crying and thinking that's not going to help anybody.
Yes.
And then you've got the professional nursing and healthcare professionals who are also worried about saying the wrong thing.
To contemplate our own mortality is scary. Nobody really wants to go there, do they, really? No. Well, very few people want to go there.
Sure.
And you're forced into it. I think, sometimes fear makes us change because you're forced into this position of having to look at it at some point. The first step is in the listening, the asking, and then responding, and knowing that we might get it wrong. And look, I'm reminded, having had children, how much effort went into my birth plan. How much discussion, how much time, how much thought, all those decision making. Do you have a natural birth, or do you have an epidural? What would you do in these circumstances? At what point would I ask my husband to demand a cesarean? And you put trust in your midwife, you put trust in your care team, and then the hospital, wherever you're delivering. And it needs to be the same for death, really, is to do the best we possibly can. Because the thing that strikes me is we're talking here as if this is something new, but actually the community that our parents and our grandparents had, there was usually somebody in the village. There was always the midwife that you would go to, or the good neighbour, and there was always somebody who would be there for end of life. And it might have been different parts of it. I remember, certainly with a Celtic background, there was certainly somebody who would go and lay out the body.
Yes.
Before there were funeral directors all ready for the undertaker.
Yeah.
So, there's always been these roles. It's just in different guises under different names, and as we develop our services to be more research-based and evidence-based, sometimes we forget to be human-based. We talked about fear earlier, and I think unexpressed fear from the individual just can be worse. If you're sitting on an anxiety, or you're frightened about how you're going to die, or you don't know who's going to be there for you, or maybe you have nobody, then sitting with that fear unexpressed, and that it will just become more burdensome. It won't go away.
So is part of your work at Rowcroft to try and allay those fears? I mean, how do you do that?
So I think it's working with the emotion again around that fear. What is it they're frightened of, and what can they do, perhaps for themselves? We do try and get people to find their own solutions, because they know them and they know their families or their situations much better than we do. But if it's something tangible, like I'm frightened of being in pain, then we'd go a long way to try and allay those sorts of fears, because that's why people use our service. We're very expert in symptom relief and symptom control. Mm-hmm. And so we know a number of ways, not just with strong painkillers. Sometimes people get relief from suffering by spending time with our music therapist or our complementary therapists, and having some touch therapy, some Reiki, some healing, some massage. So we look at it in what many people term a holistic way. So it's supporting somebody's spirit, their mind, their heart, as well as their physical body.
What are the kind of consequences when people don't have those conversations?
Yeah. What we hear a lot is, I didn't know that, or I regret not saying that, or I wish I'd known earlier, because then I could have. Many people do say to us, it could have been better if only.
Right.
And some of the if onlys you can have an impact on, and some of you couldn't. If only they hadn't died so quickly. It's hard, but equally, we can make a difference. We can help people to have a better ending, if we confront that fear and allow people to open up and talk if they want to. Again, there's a Dying Matters film called I Didn't Want That, and it shows 5 scenarios, and that illustrates it beautifully. There's a young homeless guy and hadn't made any preparations for his dog. So the consequences, what happens to that dog? There's an older chap who has a stroke and doesn't die but can't speak, and he watches his daughter and granddaughter fighting over what's going to happen to him and who knows best. There's a young man who's had cancer treatment and is at the end of his cancer treatment, and yet his brother still wants him to be resuscitated, even though it's unlikely to bring him back. So there are lots of consequences to us not having conversations, and if we're not having conversations or making decisions, people will make decisions about us. If you know now what you want or what you'd like or what you don't want or wouldn't like, tell somebody. Tell more than one person. Document it, because you're more likely to get what you want if you talk. So we can leave it to chance, and there are some individuals and some families that say, I'm going to do that. I'm going to leave it to chance and know that my care team will do what's right for me, or my husband or my children will do what's right for me, and that's absolutely fine. So long as they know what they're saying.
Where should we be aiming for in sort of 10 years' time? With more of the same, more people involved?
Yeah, more people. Because again, when you look at the statistics about how many of us have actually had a conversation with our loved ones about what we want and we don't want, it's still in the minority. So we're still not having those conversations generally with those that love us, and we're probably getting better at planning funerals and maybe writing a will. So we think about our finances first, and then we think about maybe our final ending.
Do people have a fear of talking about death because they think in some way talking about it might make it happen?
Yes. And that's, you hear that being said, and you can read it in literature. One of the reasons people don't talk is that if they say it, if they speak it, if they dare to speak it, it's going to happen.
There's nothing wrong with thinking, if I talk about death, it's more likely to happen. We just need to get over that, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. Easy said, but harder to do.
But one of the ways of getting over that is to have a conversation with an organisation and people within, say, Rowcroft.
Yeah. Of course I'm going to say Rowcroft, but there are other great people. You've got all local GPs, you've got volunteer services that are offering support for people with chronic conditions and end-of-life care. There, Age UK, all amazing work that the Alzheimer's Society and Purple Angel are doing around dementia. It's finding the right person. The person is prepared to have that conversation, but of course if it is somebody requiring specialist palliative care, Rowcroft will be there for them. It's a basic tenet that I live by, and it kind of links the conversation we've been having with fear and about me trying to encourage people to go beyond that fear if they can, and if they're assisted and if they trust a person to talk to. And it's not my quote, it's Maya Angelou, and she says, people won't always remember what we've told them, but they will remember how you made them feel. And I think even if we don't have the answer, or the answer they want to hear, or the right answer, or we don't feel we've got the right skill, we can always leave people feeling that they are listened to and maybe heard, perhaps a little bit understood, and that we've noticed where they are, and that we haven't shied away, we haven't changed the subject, we haven't walked off, we've sat with them.
So our thanks go to Kerry McNish at the Rowcroft Hospice. I think that Kerry's comments about not labelling conversations as being difficult is perhaps key. People expect to talk, and if they're not really ready, then they're likely to shut those conversations down. And besides, being worried and fearful about saying the wrong thing is very widespread. Having conversations is good. Making mistakes is not ideal, but on balance, it's probably better than not saying anything at all. It may take time, but there's also a great deal of help at hand. Just search Rowcroft Hospice, and if you need to, you can make that call, start those conversations, and start that planning. And we'll be talking more about planning from our next podcast from St Luke's Hospice. This podcast has been brought to you by Susie Garrard, founder of Next Steps for Living, Dying and Grieving. For more information about Next Steps, follow the links on this page to suzigarrod.com. That's SUZIGARROD.com, or just search Susie Garrod Next Steps. This is a How production. Please share and subscribe.